All right, today we're tackling one of the toughest and most intertwined challenges in all of mental health, the relationship between bipolar disorder and substance use. And look, when these two show up together, they don't just sit side by side. No, they feed off of each other, creating this absolutely vicious cycle that can feel completely impossible to escape. So that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? The ultimate chicken and egg problem. Does using substances trigger the mood disorder, or do the intense mood swings of bipolar disorder lead people to self-medicate with substances? It's a puzzle that's really stumped a lot of people for a long time.
Well, it turns out the answer isn't A or B, it's C, both. It's not a one-way path at all. The best way to think about it is as a dangerous two-way street. Each one of these conditions can kickstart the other, and each one can make the other worse, locking a person into this feedback loop that just gets more and more intense.
Okay, so let's walk down one side of that street first. Let's talk about path one, how substances can literally be the spark that ignites bipolar disorder, especially in someone who might already have a genetic vulnerability. And this is so important to understand because substance use is what we call a modifiable risk factor. That's just a fancy way of saying it's something we can actually do something about. And when you look at the research, wow, the numbers really speak for themselves. I mean, this isn't subtle. Compared to the general population, someone who uses cocaine is more than 3 times as likely to develop bipolar disorder. And get this, for people with a cannabis or alcohol use disorder, that risk jumps up to 4 times higher. This isn't just a hunch, it's a huge statistical red flag.
And here's another critical piece of the puzzle. It's not just if you use a substance, it's all about how much. The science is really clear on this. The more you use and the more often you use, the higher that risk climbs. It's a whole different ballgame.
This quote from a major research review just hits the nail on the head. It talks about a dose-dependent relationship. So what does that actually mean in plain English? It's simple. The bigger the dose, the bigger the risk. It establishes this really clear, undeniable pathway from heavy substance use straight to a potential bipolar diagnosis.
All right, so that's one direction of traffic. Now let's cross over to the other side of the street and look at path 2. How does having bipolar disorder itself act as fuel for the fire? How does it create this perfect storm, this high-risk environment for addiction to take hold?
A huge factor here is impulsivity. It's a core, defining feature of manic episodes. During mania, the brain is just wired for action, for rapid decisions, often without any real thought about the negative consequences. And that state right there is incredibly fertile ground for substance use to either start or get much worse. And the data on this is pretty wild. Take a look at this number. Research shows us that someone who's experiencing manic symptoms is almost 5 times more likely to later develop a cannabis use disorder. Let that sink in for a second. That's not a small bump. It's a massive increase in risk, and it's driven directly by the impulsivity of the disorder itself. And if you thought that last number was high, brace yourself. For benzodiazepines, common anxiety medications, the risk just goes through the roof. A person with manic symptoms is an incredible 11.5 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder with them. It's just staggering, and it shows how powerfully bipolar disorder can pave the way for addiction.
So you can see, this isn't just a simple cycle that goes round and round. It's really a downward spiral. When these two disorders show up together, they don't just add to each other, they seem to multiply the damage, leading to outcomes that are way worse than either condition would cause on its own. And the real-world impact is it's devastating. We see people getting diagnosed with bipolar much earlier in life, they tend to have more hospital stays, and tragically, the rates of suicide attempts are much higher. It affects everything, your ability to hold a job, to maintain relationships, even your basic ability to focus and remember things. And this whole thing can happen with, frankly, alarming speed. For some people, the first major red flag is a substance-induced psychosis, which is a terrifying experience. From that point, the median amount of time it takes to get an official diagnosis of bipolar disorder is just 1 year. 1. That's an incredibly short runway, and it shows you why getting help so urgently matters. Okay, so after laying all of that out, how severe and scary this cycle is, you're probably asking, where's the hope? Well, here's the good news. This cycle is incredibly powerful, but it is not unbreakable. There are clear, evidence-based ways to get better, and it all starts with an integrated approach. Here is the single most important rule, the absolute golden rule for treatment. You have to treat both disorders at the same time,
period. Trying to fix the substance use while ignoring the bipolar, or fixing the bipolar while ignoring the substance use, it's just a proven recipe for relapse and failure. The only thing that works, consistently, is an integrated therapy that addresses both head-on. A cornerstone of this kind of treatment is something called psychoeducation. This is all about giving people the knowledge and the tools to become the masters of their own recovery. And it's usually built around these 5 key pillars: really understanding the illness, sticking to the treatment plan, learning to spot your personal early warning signs, developing strategies to avoid substance misuse, and creating a stable, regular lifestyle. And the medication side is just as tailored. This is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. The strategy is customized to whatever substance a person is using. So, for example, for someone with alcohol use disorder, the data shows that combining Diva-Pro-X and lithium has strong clinical support. It's this kind of highly specific, evidence-based approach that really helps to break the chemical side of the cycle.
So we've seen how absolutely devastating this cycle is. But we've also seen that with the right integrated treatment, there is real, tangible hope for breaking it. But that leads us to one final, really critical question. If we know that substance use is a powerful and, importantly, a changeable risk factor, how can we, as a society, prevent this vicious cycle from ever getting started in the first place? And that's the big idea I really want to leave you with.